Hello, and welcome to our new series, Discover Torah and Ger #1. Discover Torah and Ger is our new series, and it's going to go a while. Discover Torah and Ger. It's going to go a while. This one could be, at least 30 classes, maybe 50. We're going to be on this for a while. We ended the last series, how was it called again? Seven mitzvahs, whatever it was called. What was that called? 7 mitzvot class? Whatever, dinim class, what do you call it? 7 mitzvot dinim class. And we did 30 classes, and I think it was a massive success. On YouTube, a lot of people are watching it every day, every week. There's people like kind of enrolled in the series. The numbers won't lie. They watched the whole video. We started off discovering that every Noahide law was derived from Ger Torah sources, type 1, Jacques. And it wasn't even a theory. We proved it. Did we prove it? Justin Becker, did we prove that? Did we have ample evidence to prove that? We never saw anything to the contrary. And we saw enough sources at every single time. We could go on for infinity, and essentially we are going to go to infinity because this series is no different. It's just that this series is taking the art form of what we concluded or found to a higher level, type 1. We're not sitting here being like, we found a new planet, we're just going to go move on now. No, we're not doing that. What we're saying is that since we have proven our theory, we're going to up the ante and go deeper. Because in the Dinim class, we discovered, and that's going to be our theme here. You hear me saying that word a lot, right? Discovering. We discovered a lot of things. We discovered a lot of principles, ideas, concepts, sources, foundations. We discovered a lot of things. And the Dinim class series came at the end of Ger, meaning we've been at this since 2011. And the Dinim class concluded in that's a Jewish year, 5777, but in 2017. And I would say that by 2017 and the conclusion of the Dinim class, Ger is refined. We have answered every single one of our friends out there. And I don't mean little stupid answers. We've given hard facts. I can honestly say today, I can say this for a long time, but I will honestly say it today for those listening. There is no doubt in anyone's mind with a brain and who's looked into this that the Ger Toshav Jubilee is not a contradiction to Ger Toshav of today. It requires you to look into it. Yes, there is a Ger Toshav Jubilee that does not exist today. And there is a Ger, some kind of Ger, we said, which we've explained 20 billion times, which we're not going to explain it right now because that's not what I want to do here. But there is a Ger Toshav of today. Go read Rabbi Aaron Soloveitchik's Od Yisrael Yosef Ben Yechai, translated by David Katz. Okay, so again, we've come a long way. We've refined the message. We can convey the message. The critics are still saying things like a non-Jew can't keep the Jewish Shabbos. Gee, Jacques, did you know that? Type 1. And I have a blog going to be connected to my website, Jacques, type 1 on that. There you go. The blog's name has changed. If you haven't found out that by now, it was like Cold Towards Zionism. I forget what it was called, but now it is called after our yeshiva, getsoulstrong.blogspot.com. I am proud to announce the new yeshiva will be launched either the end of this week, as in like tomorrow, or the beginning of next week based on Shabbos. The builders are not Jewish, so it's not a problem with Shabbos. The yeshiva is going to be up live and active. GetSoulStrong.com. Big round of applause for that. GetSoulStrong.com is basically here. Today I logged on myself for the first time. We have a login screen. I think you're going to like it. It's coming along pretty amazing. It's been a lot of diligence, and it's happening. The global online study community is going to be here, so a big round of applause for that. So we've refined the message, okay? Anybody that wants to know what Ger is today can know. Those that don't want to know, they just don't want to know. The camps in opposition are pretty much the conversion camp and the Noahide camp and really nobody else. There's nobody else. That's what the pushback is. The conversion camp sees it as a threat to conversion, and we're saying go ahead and convert, but at least tell people that Ger is an option. And Noahide is saying, since we didn't convert, Ger is not an option. We're saying it is an option. You just chose to be Noahide. Type 1. So that's that story. We're good. Things are refined. The last series, again, it took us to a really clear understanding. I think if you watch number 30, you will see and agree that the series ended clear, crystal clear. It is complicated. I'm not going to say it's not, but the Torah is not complicated. It is complicated. It is Torah. It is God's wisdom. This is not elementary school. So here I'm going to give a list of a lot of things that I'm going to cover in this new series. And I don't mean like one class at a time. Imagine if this was basketball, type 1. Type 1 if this was basketball class. Can anybody tell me some topics? Like, just tell me a bunch of topics that we would cover if this was basketball A to Z. Go ahead. Brand new class. I'm introducing y'all to basketball. 50 classes. Tell me some of the things that we're going to cover. Go ahead. Dribbling. Go ahead. Come on, everybody type. Let's go. Dribbling. We got more than that. Let's go. We got dribbling, free shots, fouls. Keep going. Let's go. We got a whole bunch of stuff here. Let's go. Basketball 101. Let's go. Da 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 dee, da 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 da, da 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 dee, da 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 da, da 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 dee, da 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 da. Defense. All right, we got the point. So if I wanted to make a comprehensive list of basketball, correct, Justin Becker, these would be a lot of terms. Type 1, John, these would be a lot of terms. And we can have 100 terms. Dribbling, defense, offense, teams, coaches, players, positions, courts, basketball, rubber on the ball, grip on the ball, tennis shoes, sneakers, knee pads, arm pads, elbow pads, headbands, LeBron James, Russell Westbrook, MVP, triple-double, double-double assists, points scored, points defended against. Do I make my point clear? Did I make my point clear? So the class would require you to know a whole bunch of stuff. So if we introduce today dribbling, defense, players, positions, eventually we could have a conversation about basketball, correct? Type 1. Now I'm going to go ahead and tell you my list of we call it the Discover Torah and Ger class. And I don't expect you to know many words on this list. Did you know that? I do not expect you to know many words on this list. I do not. I do not expect you to know the words on this list. But you will in time feel comfortable with these words. You do not need to know them right now. If you hear me say these words over the next 2, 3, 4 weeks, do not fret if you don't know what the word means. It's like learning a new word that I promise you, you will have to know and you will use it and you'll know it and you'll feel comfortable and happy about it. Does everybody know the word telephone? Has everyone heard of this concept, the telephone? Yeah, everyone's heard of the telephone. Do you guys struggle with the word telephone? If I say, hey, Jacques, hey, John, hey, Justin, what's a telephone? Do you sweat and get anxiety? Do you feel anxiety over that question? No, you don't. But go back to when the first time you ever learned what a telephone was. Remember when you were 4 years old and your mom and dad told you what a telephone was? Type 1, Lafib Shuto. Type 1, Lafib Shuto. Type 1, Lafib Shuto. Type 1, Lafib Shuto. So when your dad said to you, Jacques, hey, geezer, go bring me the telephone, you had an anxiety attack, didn't you? Lafib Shuto, type 1. Because you said, oh, man, what's this new invention in my house? I am confused with the telephone and the VCR. I don't know the difference between a telephone and a VCR. I am confused. I don't know what I'm doing. and you went and you tried to bring your dad the VCR, and he bopped you over the head and said, son, I asked you for the telephone. And then by your 5th birthday, you knew what a telephone was. So when someone called, you answered the phone, and you said, hello, and they said, is your dad there? And you said, Dad, someone's on the telephone for you. Type 1 for my ridiculous story, Lafib Shuto. Type 1 for my ridiculous story, Lafib Shuto. That's how these words are going to be. I'm going to tell you a bunch of words very fast, and by the end of 50 weeks or 30 weeks, you're going to know these words. Ready? We'll make a song out of it. You want to make a song out of it? We're not making a song out of it. Copy and paste, oral Torah, Ger and Noahide sources, brisk, brisker of, brisker Torah, rabbinics, Iker terms, Iker phrases, Lafib Shuto, Tzvei Dinim, Gerim, Ger, Gertoshav, Masorah, Jewish Ashkafa, Rambam, Rishona Machronim, Ger, Kabbalah, Lexicon, Taxonomy, Rashi, Green Book, Machshava, and Halacha. Halacha in terms of what is it, how does it work, B'diavad, Lechachila, Shituf, Mila, Shabbos, Talmud Torah, the Rebbe, his Sikha, and other tzaddikim. Harsh like thorns are Gerim. That is what Gerim are. Responsible for my brother. Am I responsible for my brother? Schar, reward, Makablin, mitzvah v'osei, linguistics, Noahide, spirituality, Ger issues and pushback, post-scheme and the system. Type 1. Type 1. All right. Do you understand now what I mean by the Discover Torah and Ger class? I think you can understand that. This is like everything that I've been talking about for 6 years, telling the world about Ger. Some people get Ger, some people don't get Ger. But to get Ger, you kind of do have to know the words on this list. Jock type 1. Jock type 1, you kind of got to know the words on this list a little bit, kind of. And Justin Becker, you can learn it, can't you, type 1? Justin Becker, you can learn it, type 1. And John, it's kind of fun, isn't it, type 1? It's kind of fun, isn't it, John, type 1? Kind of fun. And you'll get the hang of it. And those that are saying you're making it too complicated, Torah is for simpletons. It's not for simpletons, and it's not complicated. It's a little bit complicated, but your mind is built to get complicated. All right? Your mind can handle complicated. How many of you have ever had a job? How many of you have ever had a job? I've had a job too. And if you look at a job without knowing what to do, it looks pretty complicated, doesn't it? If we were to go look at an operator at AT&T, would that job look hard to you? If they said, Justin Becker, we're going to give you a job at AT&T today, would that job look hard to you? It would look hard. You got phones and wires and codes and jargons, and I would say, this job is overwhelming. But what would happen if they trained you for like 3 weeks, Justin Becker? Would that job start to get a little bit easier? And would it slow down? And would the jargon begin to make sense? And you make sense out of the code? You'd be an expert. Of course you would, because you would read the manual. You'd read the manual and you'd just learn the jargon. How many of you have ever learned jargon? How many of you have ever learned jargon? Has anyone ever learned jargon? Of course you've learned jargon. How many of you have ever played basketball and learned the jargon of basketball? Or watched your favorite TV show and learned the jargon of the TV show? Whatever you do, there's jargon. When you bought your first iPod, there was jargon, right? You have to download. You got to get an app. There's an iStore. An iStore is not the same as an iPod, is it, Justin? And an iPod is not the same as an iPad. No, it's not a typo. There's a difference between iPad and iPod. Not a typo, is it? Not a typo. The A and the O make a big difference. One is a music player. One's like a little computer. Then what's an iPad mini? Well, it's a small iPad. What's an iPad non-mini? It's not a small iPad. And you figured out, hello, Addo. All right, that's my introduction to Discover Torah and Ger. Can you understand a little bit of where Discover Torah and Ger is going to be, how it's going to go, what it's going to be like, and what's involved in the class? Can you get a little taste of it? It's going to be a class and a forum that we can talk about everything discovering, Discover Torah and Ger. And we're going to have official topics. It's not going to be this random. Don't worry. The first topic that we're going to talk about, not tonight, but next week, is Ger and circumcision. Type 1 for Ger and circumcision, bris milah. Type 1 for Ger and circumcision, bris milah. And that's going to be the first real topic we get to. And that might not actually happen because, if I learn between now and next week something even more amazing, we're going to have to learn that before we get to Ger and circumcision. Like we had to wait for Shitu for about 20 years. So I can't make that happen, but you know how it is. That's right. We do have an intro tonight, which I'll get to here in a second. I really do hope to do the bris milah over the next, let's say, mini series of about 5 classes. So Discover Torah and Ger is going to open with its first mini series of about probably 4 to 5 classes. I'm guessing could be less, could be more, starting next week. And that'll be the first series, the mini series in our new series. Again, it'll be a lot of mini series, if that's a word. It'll be one-offs, if that's a word. It's going to be everything. It's going to be our refined product, clearly articulating everything. If it's Shituf one day, if it's Noahide one day, if it's Noahide 3 weeks, I don't know. And it's not advanced. It's not advanced. In fact, if you missed Ger until now, this is the series you want to come to. This is the one where you're just going to want to come and jump in. And if you're lost, hang around for a week, 2 weeks, and you'll get it. Type 1 jock. Type 1 jock. All right, so that's my introduction to our new series. Does anybody have any questions about our new series before I continue with the you call it like the Hakdama, right? It's like what do you call it? I guess the preface. I gave my little introduction, but there's going to be a sample, like I don't know how you call it on the linguistic terms. Does anybody have any questions before I start with my preamble, whatever word you need to put in there, i.e. that which begins the class before we get to the meat potatoes, which is next week? No, two. Addo gave 2. All right. Okay, here we go. Discover Torah and Ger, take 1, type 1. The riddle that we are solving is, what is Noahide? Am I a Noahide? Am I Ger Toshav? Is there Ger Toshav? Isn't there a Ger Toshav only in Jubilee, Justin Becker? Rabbi Katz is the only rabbi in the world that says there's a Ger Toshav, which isn't true, but they say it's true, but it's not true. They still say it's true, even though it's not true. Does everybody get the riddle? That's the riddle. And then we just argue about this for about 20,000 years, right? I'm a Noahide. You're not a Noahide. I'm a Ger Toshav, but you're not a Ger Toshav. But there's no Jubilee. But you don't need Jubilee. Yes, you do need Jubilee because I'm a Noahide. You're not a Noahide. I'm a convert. Well, I'm not a convert, but I'm thinking about converting. Well, I'm a former Christian, but I'm thinking about converting. Can you do that? What about Shituf? That's if you're Noahide, but not a Noahide. Did I reject the Avodah Zarah with Kabbalah? Can you do Kabbalah? Who's talking about mysticism? No, not mysticism, Mekablin. Mekablin means accept. Does it mean accept or force Kabbalah? Oy. Does that argument sound familiar? Does that argument sound familiar? 1, 2, 2, 1, 1, 2. All right, so that's the riddle. The riddle is, how do we undo that argument? They say there is no Ger till Jubilee. I say there is no Jubilee till Ger. That's correct. Now, is everyone on the same page with me to undo the argument? I'm calling that the riddle. I don't know why I call it the riddle. I just do. Iker term. Lefib Shuto, type 1. Okay, here we go. Avodah Zorah 64b. Can anyone tell me, what do I mean by Avodah Zorah 64b? And why would I start a class on a very random way like that? Who starts a class Avodah Zorah 64b? Who does that? Who in their right mind starts teaching, okay, officially beginning, Avodah Zorah 64b? I start that way. What does it mean? What does Avodah Zorah 64b mean? The answer has 2 answers. everybody in the Noahide world would say, Rabbi Katz, can you just tell us what it means? And those in the Ger camp know that, no, Jacques, I'm not going to tell you. Right? I'm not going to tell you. And the Noahides complain and say, but tell us, we don't know what it means. We don't speak Hebrew. We don't look it up. We don't know. And I say, but Justin Becker, you got to look it up anyways. And you say, but I don't speak Hebrew. I don't know how. And then I say to Justin, did you ever ask me to show you? Did you ever ask me to explain it to you? Did you ever schedule a Skype appointment and I would go over it with you? Did you ever see the 5,000 videos explain what Avodah Zarah 64b is? Did you ever hang out long enough to hear me explain what Avodah Zarah 64b is? And the Noahides respond with, but you could have told me 20 times by now. I could have been a world expert if you would have just told me. For the last 5 minutes, you didn't tell me. Did you have a point for not telling me? Yes, I did. I had other things to say that were more important. Type 1. Then why did you introduce Avodah Zarah 64b? Because it's also important. And Jacques, I'm not God. From the mouth of God we heard too. But I'm not God. I can only speak two different things. If I was God, I would speak one and you would hear two. But I'm not God. So I have to speak two things the best I can. But I'm only human. So bear with me. Avodah Zarah 64b is a brisa in the tractate of Avodah Zarah. What is a brisa? It's a Talmudic teaching. How many of you have ever heard of the Mishnah? How many of you have ever heard of the Mishnah? Malcolm's trying to get in class. Let's see if we can help Malcolm do that. Hold on. Let's see if I can teach and talk at the same time. I don't know if I can do that, so hang on a second. I'm not that talented, Jacques. I'm not that talented. There he is, Malcolm. Tell Malcolm if he's asking, he's a member now. Good to see Brookie Lee signed up. I was thinking about Brookie Lee. That's good to see. I haven't checked my list in a little while. All right. Okay, how many of you have ever heard of the Oral Torah Type 1? Oral Torah Type 1. In the Oral Torah, it's composed of the Mishnah and the Gemara. I didn't ask you if you knew what it meant. All I said was, did you ever hear those terms? Type 1. Of course you did. Type 1. The Gemara explains the Mishnah. You'll say, but I don't know what the Mishnah is, so how do I know what the Gemara is? And I say, I didn't ask you that question, so don't ask me that question. All I asked you was, do you understand the words in their most literal format? There is something called Gemara that explains something called the Mishnah. I didn't tell you what the Mishnah was, so don't say you don't understand. Do you understand? Type 1. Of course you understand. Type 1. So the Mishnah was written by Rabbi Yehuda Hanassi. The room is full. We only have 5 people in the room until the yeshiva's launched. Sorry about that. We downscaled until we launched the yeshiva. Tell them the yeshiva will be launched within a couple of weeks, God willing, in terms of the classroom. It could be actually next week, as I intend it to be. But I can't make that a fact. Registration will be for sure. The classroom, hopefully the kinks and bugs are worked out of it. So I can't make that happen. But it should be. Okay. Rabbi Yehuda Hanassi, who was a Tana, a sage of the Talmud, wrote the Mishnah, the encapsulation of the entire Oral Torah Type 1. So now you know what the Gemara is. What is the Gemara? The explanation of the Mishnah, like we said. And Rabbi Yehuda Nasi wrote to the tune of 60 tractates, which encompass the entire Oral Torah, that which is the law and wisdom, that is kind of in the written Torah, the Chumash, but it's not explicit. What's the famous idea? You will put the totafot as signs between your eyes. And everyone says, what are totafot? And the Jew will tell you tefillin. And you say, but it doesn't say tefillin. And the Jewish rabbi will say, did you learn the Oral Torah? That which is not explicitly written in the written Torah can be found in the oral Torah, type 1, Jacques. So there are oral teachings which make up the Mishnah and the oral Torah. Jacques Kotzi, is there anything in the oral Torah that is not contained in the Mishnah? Do 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 do. Wrong, Jacques. Wrong. There is a lot of things that are not in the Mishnah. Jacques, have you ever heard of the Zohar? Have you ever heard of the Zohar? That is an oral teaching, even though it got written down. Jacques, anybody, have you ever heard of the Midrash? Has anyone ever heard of the Midrash? That's also oral teachings, not in the Mishnah. How many of you ever heard of the Tosefta? Tosefta, additions at the end of the Talmud that did not make it into the Talmud. Oral teachings that are not contained in the Mishnah. And the cherry on top, Jacques, have you ever heard of a Brisa? A Brisa is a Mishnaic teaching that Rabbi Yehuda Hanassi, for whatever reason, did not feel to include it in the Mishnah, but the Gemara that explains the Mishnah can choose to bring proofs and perspectives from Brisas, type 1. You may call that, Justin Becker, the deleted scenes from the movies that make it into the Blu-ray or whatever it's called, DVD version. Okay. So now, in Avodah Zarah 64b, now we have some context about Avodah Zarah 64b, don't we? Talmud, oral Torah, and it's either a Mishnah or Brisa. And I'll tell you the answer to Brisa, type 1. Avodah Zarah 64b is a Brisa found in the tractate Avodah Zarah, Idolatry of the Oral Torah, penned by Rabbi Yehuda Hanassi, type 1. Doesn't it have a little bit more context now that I explained a little bit about the oral Torah that we can further know what Avodah Zarah 64b is? Or would you have liked me to have just said, well, Justin, Avodah Zarah 64b is a passage from the Talmud? Which one would you have preferred, the former or the latter? The former or the latter? The long-winded explanation, or to simply pat you on the head and say it is a passage in the Talmud? Thank you. Why? Because it's insulting. When someone asks a question, you say, well, Justin, it's a passage in the Talmud. Okay, that doesn't say anything. And when they ask the question, what do you mean by Avodah 64b? You're trained to want me to tell you it's a passage in the Talmud. Well, stop being trained that way. Type 1. Stop being trained that way. Type 1. Sit down, grab a coffee, and listen, and then you'll be ready to receive what is Avodah Zarah 64b. In fact, I could never teach Ger again and just stop now, and that's Ger. Is it not? What, Rabbi Katz, what's Ger? What's Ger? Let's talk about the Zohar. Yada, yada, yada. By the end of it, you'll get Ger. Because if I just tell you, oh, it's a stranger or an alien. Really? You guys want that answer? What is a Ger? He is a stranger or an alien. And that's what they want. They want a definition to satisfy the answer. He is a special alien. He is a special alien who does special laws. 7 of them. That will get you nowhere. That kind of explanation. Nowhere. And that's why the Noahide world is exactly there. Nowhere. And Ger is somewhere. Because Ger is not new, Jacques, is it? Type 1. Ger has been around since the beginning of the Torah. It is not new. It is new, however, to talk about Ger in English. You know why it's new to talk about Ger in English? Does anyone know why it's new to talk about Ger in English? Anyone know? First time. Justin Becker, did you know that there were penguins playing hockey with the Houston Astros in Antarctica until the Arizona Diamondbacks hit a home run on first base because Randy Johnson threw a long bomb for a touchdown. Did you know that? No, you didn't know that. You know why you didn't know that? Does anybody know why that is a unique statement, which I just said? That is the first time that was ever said in English. Ever. That was never said in English before. Can you believe that? Does anyone know why it was never said in English before? Because I just made it up. I just made up an expression. And in that expression, I chose to articulate it in English. Therefore, it was the first time that the English language was ever said in that way. I just said something for the first time in English-speaking history. I suggest you guys make a Wikipedia page at once. Extract the teaching from this class and transliterate and transcribe the first time that was ever said in the English language. Type 1. So once upon a time, about 1,000 years ago, some rabbi in England, he said, well, since we now speak English, that the Latin Vulgate has abandoned us because we're lazy, we're going to speak English in this yeshiva. And then he said to his students, can you please type 1? And they all typed 1. And he said his first class was, there is a non-Jew who keeps the 7 mitzvot, and he's called a Ger Toshav. You know that? And it was the first time it was ever spoken in English. And would you believe the very next comment was the very next thing ever said about Ger Toshav in English? They said, but they can't be Ger Toshav until there's no Jubilee. My point is, and I think you get my point, Torah was spoken in Hebrew and Yiddish for at least the last 1,000 years, and before that, Aramaic and Hebrew. Type 1. So at some point in the last 1,000 years, everything you know in Torah was for the first time in English. Type 1. All right? When they said the word Nazir, a Nazirite, that was the first time in English once. When they said a concubine, that was the first time in English. When they said King David, that was the first time in English. So English is always new. Anyone that knows anything about linguistics knows the English language is always changing, becoming new, and incorporating new words. That's how English and languages work. Type 1. And you'll say, but the Hebrew language doesn't do that. And I'll tell you, duh. We know that. That's why it's called the Holy Tongue. We're trying to understand the Holy Tongue. It doesn't have to change. It's not supposed to change. But the language you speak it in will change. If we start speaking Swahili, because Torah is great in Swahili, then we will say Ger Toshav for the first time in Swahili. In fact, I wonder, do the Swahili-speaking people ever speak about Ger Toshav? I don't know. If they did, there would have been a first time, and for sure somebody would have brought up Jubilee in Swahili. So now we have the internet and people talking globally for the first time, and that's not a chiddush either, is it? Growing up, I always wondered, well, would I ever speak to someone from Australia? Or do I have to write a snail mail lesson or a letter? And they would say, ooh, you can't call Australia. That's a collect phone call or a long-distance phone call, and that'll cost about $100. So I didn't call. Now I can talk to Jacques in Cape Town for free. Can you believe that? Can you believe that I can call Jacques in Cape Town for free? And I actually get to hear South African accents. I dreamt as a kid when I ever hear about British people and all kind of different cultures, and now it's like nothing. It's not even a chiddush, is it, Jacques? Type 1. So the world got together, and if you were an American in the 80s, I don't think you would ever call something dodgy because I didn't know what dodgy meant, type 1. After living in Israel for nearly 20 years and you hang out with the British people long enough, you start to realize that dodgy is an all right word. It just kind of explains it. Hey, did you get ripped off? Yeah, the dodgy guy got me. It's not weird, is it? Growing up, it may have seemed a little weird. Little weird. What do you mean dodgy? Are you British? Nowadays, people use words from all different cultures because language works that way. It's called loan words in linguistics. So in the English language now, because this is our time, and everything was coined once upon a time, we are at the nexus of coining Ger Toshav and its resources into the English language, type 1. Every time I get a source, what does Jacques ask me to do? That Rav Katz, that's great. Can you translate it to English? No, Jacques, I can't. Or you'll say something like, wow, that's a great source. Is it in English? What do you mean, Jacques? Is it in English? Are you asking me to put the Torah into English for the first time? Jacques, is that what you're asking me? Are you asking me, Rabbi Katz, will this be the very first time ever that source is in English? Type 1. Pretty amazing, isn't it? Pretty amazing. I just translated Midrash Shlomo, Vilna Gaon Zionism, the first time ever in the history of mankind it was put in English. Can you believe that? So there's all kinds of new coined terms that were never said in English before. Do you know what Zionism of the Vilna Gaon was called? And he invented Zionism. You know what it's called? Tzionit Gra'it. Gra Zionism. I will give you $5 if you can find me a substantial amount of people that have heard in the English language the expression Vilna Gaon Zionism. Anyone want to take the bet with me? Anyone want to take the bet with me? No, you don't. Because no one read the book, and if they read the book, they didn't think to put it in English. Okay. Avodah Zorah 64b has a brisa in it, type 1. And our brisa is Ezehu Ger Toshav. Who's a Ger Toshav? And then there are ostensibly 3 opinions. And those 3 opinions are the basis of Ger Toshav in 3 other places in the Talmud. Can anybody name for me the other 3 places in the Talmud? Come on. Jacques. Krisos. 9a. Makos. 9a. Yevamos 48b. All right. We have the Ger Toshav that took out a guy, God forbid. Ger Toshav Shabbos. Say what? Ger Toshav of the 10 Commandments. And Ezehu Ger Toshav. How many of you have ever heard about copy and paste? Copy and paste. Copy and paste. The Rambam barely wrote anything. Yes, that's correct. So the Ger Toshav naysayers who say not till Jubilee, Rabbi David Katz, because the Rambam says in Hilchos Isuri Bia, chapter 14, halacha 7, and what does the Rambam say there, Jacques? Ezehu Ger Toshav. Who's a Ger Toshav? Now, in 7, did the Rambam write that, Justin? Or did he copy and paste from Avodah Zorah? Did he write it or copy and paste? So the Rambam's halacha is the source the Rambam and the laws of forbidden relations with a woman, Isuri Bia, or is the source copied and pasted for whatever reason to the Rambam, and it is actually rooted in Avodah Zorah 64b. So if I want to know, is there Ger Toshav today, as per the Rambam, Should I look into the Rambam or should I look into Avodah Zorah 64b? Avodah Zorah 64b. And if I see rabbis in the last couple hundred years speaking about Ezahu Ger Toshav, who's a Ger Toshav, should I assume that they read the Rambam? Or should I assume that they read the Rambam, copied and pasted from the Rambam, who copied and pasted from Avodah Zorah 64b, and they know how to understand Avodah Zorah 64b? What do you think? Former or latter? Former or latter? Former or latter? Former or latter? Latter. So now, in Avodah Zorah 64b, in the Brisa, the first three opinions are called the Reisha. What does Reisha mean? The beginning. Type 1, because you understand that. The beginning. And therefore, if there's a beginning, like any story, there's an ending. Type 1, if you've ever heard the word ending before. Type 1, if you've ever heard the word ending before. And the ending is the fourth opinion in Avodah Zorah 64b in the Brisa, who is a Ger Toshav. And the first three opinions are fundamentally different than the last one opinion. Because when the Talmud works, many times, in fact, hardly ever not, the beginning of a Mishnah or Brisa is a different subject than the Seifa, the end of the Mishnah or Brisa. The sentence would look like this if it were in English. Jacques lives in South Africa. Justin Becker ate a donut. Jacques lives in South Africa. Justin Becker ate a donut. Can everyone identify the Reisha? Can everyone identify the Reisha? Can everyone identify the Reisha? Hurry up. Hurry up, type 1. It's not hard. The Reisha is Jacques lives in South Africa. Jacques lives in South Africa. Jacques lives in South Africa. What's the Seifa? What's the end of the teaching? Let's go. If Jacques lives in South Africa, and that's the Reisha, the beginning, what's the end of the teaching? Let's go. Come on, let's see some green. The Seifa is Justin eats donuts. So then you'd say, why does Rabbi Katz teach a teaching that Jacques lives in South Africa and Justin eats donuts? Because it's an Iker term, and Jacques is a professional liver of South Africa. He has a business card, Lafib Shuto, Jacques. My name's Jacques. I live in South Africa professionally. Jacques, what do you do for a living? I live in South Africa. Type 1, Lafib Shuto, Jacques. It doesn't have to make sense literally. That's just what he does. Well, who does that? I don't know. We don't have to get literal here. For the sake of argument, say it's a new Hollywood movie, and his name is, it's a comedy movie, and Jacques shows up and says, my name's Jacques. I live in South Africa. That's what I do for a living. All right? How many of you have ever seen a commercial on TV? How many of you have ever seen a commercial on TV? So they have something called the Hair Club for Men. I'm not only its president, but I'm a member too. Does that make sense? Does that make sense? I'm not only its president, but I'm a member too. Does that make sense? Type 2. Type 2. But it doesn't have to make sense. It's advertising. You assume it has to make sense. It doesn't have to make sense. So then why'd you bring Justin Becker eats donuts? Hey, Justin, don't you work at Dunkin' Donuts? Justin Becker, don't you work at Dunkin' Donuts? Type 1. So Rabbi Katz wanted to consolidate teachings. We were talking about professions. I'm a rabbi, and John is a post office delivery guy, and Addo is a good job here. He is a metal worker. He works with metal. And then I teach my big teaching, Jacques from South Africa, and Justin eats donuts. Now does it have context? Now does it have context? Type 1. Type 1. Maybe Jacques is a diplomat for the country of South Africa. I don't know. Maybe he's a government worker. He works in South Africa. It's possible. Okay, Iker terms. So now in our Brisa, by Avodah Zorah 64b, the first three opinions talk about three different coordinates of Ger Toshav, type 1. Three different coordinates of Ger Toshav. He rejects Avodah Zorah with Kabbalah before 3 people. He accepts the 7 laws, or he accepts the whole Torah, but he chooses to eat nevela, type 1. And that Reisha has many, 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 many things you can do with it. Imagine if it was a basketball brisa, type 1. Basketball brisa, type 1. And in my brisa, it goes like this. Who is a basketball player? A basketball player is Michael Jordan. Somebody else says it is Hakeem Olajuwon. And another one says it's Kobe Bryant. Got it? How many different ways can we take that teaching? You don't know what I'm comparing to. Is it about scoring, defense, marketing, advertising, position, size, location? Which one am I talking about? Maybe all, maybe none. That's called a superconscious position. No one's arguing. They're bringing up 3 different distinct coordinates, and whatever light you filter through there, you will get an answer. Want to try? Type 1. Type 1. Michael Jordan, Hakeem Olajuwon, Kobe Bryant. The Mishnah is talking about scoring. Type 1. Type 1. Type 1. So therefore, Michael Jordan's the answer because he's the greatest scorer of all time. Type 1. Hakeem Olajuwon's the answer because he represents scoring when Michael Jordan retired. Type 2. Type 1. Type 1. And Kobe Bryant is the answer. He represents Michael Jordan that retired the second time. Oh, Justin Becker, give me a big old one there. Give me a big one there. It worked out, did it not? You see that? You see how that was divine providence? Does everyone see how that was divine providence? I could not have known that when I said those 3 people. It just works. Torah wisdom just works. And we can define it differently. It's assists. It's assists. Michael Jordan scores because someone passed him the ball. Type 1. Hakeem Olajuwon scores because no one passed him the ball. He just has the ball. Type 1. And Kobe Bryant scores and chooses not to pass the ball. 3 different players, 3 different scenarios. Type 1. Everybody, type 1. Now we have the Seifa, the end of the teaching, that we can store wine by a Ger Toshav. All right, this is the big grand finale today. Ready? Put your thinking caps on. This opinion, if we were to say that the Reisha had 3 basketball players, type 1. Type 1. The Seifa, you know what the Seifa is in our analogy? Wayne Gretzky. Everybody type the word, huh? Everyone type the word, huh? Because the Seifa is different fundamentally from the Reisha. That's what the Talmud's teaching you. The first 3 opinions are Ger Toshav in one way, and the last opinion, Ger Toshav, is not arguing with the first 3. It's a completely different deal. The first one is, do we sustain the Ger Toshav? And what is the minimal level of observance that we would sustain? And then some say it's only the second opinion. And the third opinion is sustenance through meat, but not the mitzvah of sustenance. And the first opinion, rejecting avodah zarah, is no sustenance at all. It's the minimal level Ger Toshav. And therefore, minimal levels, Ger Toshav non-Jubilee, sustenance is only Jubilee. Since the veil is not sustenance, it's always and don't need Jubilee. Jacques type 1. Jacques type 1. The veil is all the time, doesn't need Jubilee. The middle opinion, 7 laws, is only when there's Jubilee we sustain you. First opinion is no sustenance because we don't poskin that way, therefore non-jubilee necessary, type 1. Justin Becker. So the last opinion is Seifa, which is fundamentally different. We keep wine around the non-Jew, the Ger Toshav. Okay, ready? What do you call a goy? Remember, Lafi Pshuto, Iker term, know your genre. Jacques, what's a goy? Does Malacha wrong, Jacques? Wrong, Jacques. I tricked you. I tricked you. You know why I tricked you? Because if we were talking about Shabbos, it's a does malacha. Justin Becker's correct. A goy is an idol worshiper. Jacques, we're talking about avodah zarah now. It's a different goy. Type 1, because that's how Lafim Shuto works. Then you would say, well, how am I supposed to know that? You're not. It's called you got to look it up and learn it inside. Type 1. Type 1. So a goy is an idol worshiper. And the rabbis made a law. It's called a rabbinic decree. It is not scriptural. Type 1. It is a man-made, made-up law. Okay? And that is not an attack on a rabbi. That's how rabbinic laws work. You can call it the fence of the Torah. Now, if I had a 7 Canaanite idolater come to my house right now, could he touch my wine, Justin Becker? No, because it would become Yayin Nesach, idolatrous wine. If you're not a 7 Canaanite idolater, you are not an idolater. Type 1. That's Lafib Shuto. That is Lafib Shuto. If you are not a Canaanite idolater, you are not an idolater. You say, how could that be? I'm a Hindu and I pray to 5,000 gods. Type 1. And I would say, yes, you are kind of like an idolater. I will treat you like an idolater. But Lafib Shuto, you are not an idolater because you're not a 7 Canaanite nation idolater. Type 1. You would have to prove to me that you are an idolater. But Justin, we don't want to take the risk, do we? No. I'm afraid that you may be an idolater underneath it all. So the rabbi said, how do we know if one's an idolater? We'll make a law. No goy will ever touch our wine, and thereby it'll never be idolatrous wine. Does that make sense? Type 1. Does that make sense? Type 1. And the rabbis then said, okay. But since we made the law, we can stipulate the law. Type 1. We can stipulate the law. Type 1. If we know he's not an idolater, we'll let him touch the wine. And the rabbi said, sold. A non-idolater goy can touch the wine. Got it? And the rabbi said, wow, do we know such a goy? Do we know such a goy that he can even touch our wine? And that goy is not an idolater? And it's not idolatrous wine? Type 1. And the rabbis convened. And they said, we do know such a goy. And the taxonomy of Torah set in. There is always a taxonomy of Torah. And the taxonomy of Torah says there's 3 kinds of goyim in the world. Idolaters, Ger Toshavs, and Ishmaelites. And are they all related? No. Lafim Shuto, they're all different. An idolater is a 7 Canaanite or some Hindu or anyone I don't trust. We call that a goy. Type 1. The Ger Toshav, I've heard about him. He's like a unicorn, but there's no Jubilee, and I'm no expert, so we don't touch Ger Toshav. He's a giraffe, and I don't trust giraffes because it might just be a donkey with a long neck. You can never know these days. A lot of Photoshop going on. And then there's an Ishmaelite, and the Arabs are good people. They're good people. And they say, why are they such good people? They're kind of like idolaters because they keep the bris milah. They keep circumcision. Oh. But that's not kosher. They're not doing it like the halacha. Well, let me tell you like this. There's a halacha that if a goy removes his foreskin in the name of removing his foreskin, but not conversion, he's not considered a goy. He's considered something else. We call him a non-idolatrous goy, type 1. There's a goy who's not an idolater. Anybody that would do circumcision, Lafib Shuto, cannot be a goy. Because a goy would never do circumcision. Hey, Justin Becker, how would you recognize a seven Canaanite nation? Would he have a foreskin? Lafib Shuto, would he have a foreskin? Yes, he would. And Goyim have foreskins. But the Ishmaelite, who has a book that talks about one God, they remove the foreskin, they can touch our wine. Type 1. So therefore, if it's a Muslim, he can touch our wine. If it's a Ger Toshav in the time of Jubilee, he can touch our wine. But the Goyim got to stay out. Type 1. But wait a minute. How come you mentioned Ger Toshav if it's a halacha written for today? Shouldn't it have just said Ishmaelites? There's no Ger Toshav today, not till Jubilee. So why did you say it? In fact, why do you always say Ger Toshav? Well, because you can, John, you can be like a Ger Toshav, type 1. Even not Jubilee? Yeah, even non-Jubilee today, you can kind of be like a Ger Toshav. Do we know anyone that's not like a Ger Toshav? Yeah, the Ishmaelites. They're called non-idolatrous Goyim. Can I be a Ger Toshav? Well, you convert to Islam, and you'll be like a Ger Toshav. Well, I don't want to go 2 steps back just to touch your wine. Can I, a former Christian goy, be a Ger Toshav? Well, what you're saying is, can you remove idolatry? And I can't do that. I can't trust you, Justin. I don't know if you believe in Jesus or not, type 1. You say, come on, I don't believe in Jesus. I gave it up. I mean, who even believes in Jesus today? On an idolatrous level, Shituf is allowed. And I say, look, Justin, I just can't trust you. Because there's no Ger Toshav till Jubilee. I don't know enough about the Kabbalah. I don't know enough about you. We're not Macablin, Justin. Can't you just convert to Islam? Let Islam win. Let them convert the world to Islam, Muhammad, and then you can touch the wine. But that's all bad learning. Because the Ger Toshav is mentioned. But we'll tell you there's no Ger Toshav today. Then we'll go round and round and round and round, and the riddle never gets solved, does it? Everyone type 1, the riddle never gets solved, does it? In 1960-something or other, Vendell Jones stands up tall, and he declares, I have rejected Jesus. And they call me a Noahide, type 1. And the rabbi said, wow, you're a what? A Noahide. And they all said, a former Baptist minister and you don't believe in Jesus? They took him to the Lubavitcher Rebbe, and it was proven. Whatever Vendell Jones the Noahide was, he did not believe in Jesus. And then he bought Chaim Chlorfine's book, Path of the Righteous Gentile, available at Amazon.com, along with World of the Ger on sale. So then, a true story, Vendell Jones got 5,000 copies of Path of the Righteous Gentile from Chaim Chlorfine. True story. And Yoel Schwartz was brought in to write halacha for these new Noahides. And then you had 2 Noahides, 5 Noahides, 5,000 Noahides. Then in the 1990s, the Temple Institute started spreading Noahides. And then the internet started spreading Noahides. Guess what you had by 2010, everybody? You had Ray Pedersen of Noahide Nations and Ask Noah teaching, spreading Noahide. My friends, you had a nation born of a nation called Noahides who are strictly designated by name as a non-idolatrous nation, type 1. And it became universally accepted. All of Judaism accepted the Noahides. And what did that get the Noahides? What did that get them? Nothing. You're still Shituf. Technically, you can still believe in Jesus. That's not considered idolatry. You keep your 7 laws. By the way, what is a ben Noach? It's a Nachri. The Talmudic term for a Nachri is a biblical term. The Talmudic term for Nachri is ben Noach. 7 laws of Bnei Noach are 7 laws for Nachri. But what happened was, if you became a Noahide, ostensibly you were not a Muslim, you were not a Christian, you were not a Hindu, you were not a Jew, you were a Noahide. A rabbinic structure, a congregation of Goyim who were not idolaters, type 1. Should a Noahide come to the house of a Jew, he would be allowed to touch my wine. And I would call him a Ger Toshav. Type 1, Jacques, my Noahide friend. And as long as these Noahides were doing non-idolatrous things, they could be called a Ger Toshav. If they refused to be a Shabbos Goy, to worship Hashem as a non-idolater, you might be called a Ger Toshav. If you can touch Jewish wine, you might be called a Ger Toshav. And lo and behold, throughout the entire Talmud, we find a plethora of situations that a Noahide of today, which is not a Ben Noach, it's not a Nachri, it's not a Hasid, it's a Vendell Jones derivative of a recent congregation of Goyim who have chosen to identify as non-idolaters, who have taken their right and liberty to function like a Ger Toshav of today. And there's enough of these situations that they can effectively be in a position of Ger Toshav almost all the time. Type 1. And they have reason to call themselves Gerim. Gerim Grurim. They're just going from Ger to Ger to Ger to Ger to Ger. They're Gering themselves. So even though they do belong to Noahide, a non-idolatrous nation of Goyim, they can take Kabbalah, remove the foreskin, remove the label of Nachri Goy Akum Ben Noach nations, and become attached to Israel and be considered Israel. Maybe it's not called the holiness of Israel. That comes with a bris milah for the sake of conversion. But they can be called Israel. fourth non-holy house of Israel, the Nilva Ger. And Rambam 10:10 says they can do any mitzvah of the Torah, but not like one is commanded and does, but gets schar and reward for what he does. And why does the Rambam call him Ben Noach? As the same non-full Ger Toshav. Because there's no full Ger Toshav till Jubilee. So I can't say that you're never a Noahide, because maybe there's a time that you don't want to take your right of Ger Toshav to touch my wine. You're okay with chilling as a Noahide, non-idolatrous goy when you go shopping at the grocery store. Now, at the grocery store, you may choose to be a Ger Toshav. It's up to you. Noahide is an open door to Ger Toshav. If you choose to walk through that door, more times than not, you want Kabbalah, this or that, that's up to you. A Noahide does not need to be a Ger Toshav. He says, I am a Noahide, I'm not an idolater. And he doesn't want to do anything with Israel, Jews, wine, Shabbos, and he has that right. That's the teaching, answering the riddle. What is a Noahide? What is a Ger Toshav? Once you discover why there's a Ger Toshav today, you can't discover why there's a Ger Toshav of today until you get to the wine and realize the Bryson of Avodah Zarah 64b had 4 opinions, 3 and then 1. By then, you've seen Ger through the entire Rambam and Torah and Talmud, oral Torah. The Brisker Rav, Svei Dinim for the mouth of God we heard too. And you start to find out Ger is everywhere. It's not just a level in halacha by the Bnei Noach who find the way. It's in Kabbalah and Noga and everywhere. That's the answer to the riddle. Why the Noahides claim they exist, why they have a right to exist, why the Ger Toshav has a right to exist. It's not a contradiction. It's a coordinate, it's a free will choice. And the linchpin to the sugya is bris milah, which we'll get into next week. And ultimately the wine, which is a rabbinic decree against the goy, against the idolater, but a non-idolater can touch the wine. A non-idolater is called a Noahide. And as long as he wants to be with the Jew in the wine, he's a Ger Toshav, or like a Ger Toshav. That fractal exists in every aspect of Jewish law. Wherever there's a Jew, there's the potential for a non-Jew. The non-Jew can choose to be an idolater, neutral, Noahide, Ishmaelite, or Ger Toshav, etc. Any questions, or do I say shalom? 1, 1, 2, 2, 1. Hello, 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 hello. Are we good? Any questions? Any questions? Can a Ger Toshav reject Nevela? You're not a Ger Toshav if you rejected the Nevela. What you're saying is, I'm a non-idolater who chooses to not eat Nevela, therefore I am a Noahide. Now, if you want to say that I don't eat Nevela, that means you're a Ger Tzedek non-Jew and you eat kosher meat. In that case, yes, a Ger Toshav or someone with Milah can take on the whole Torah, reject Nevela, eat kosher food, even keep Shabbos like a Jew. And the only difference between them and a Jew is mikvah and the holiness of Israel. And Jacques, that's where the two ends meet. Why is the fourth house of Ger non-holy? Because mikvah is a non-prerequisite for that house, even though one may have mikvah. And the third holy house, mikvah, is mandatory. Any other questions? All right. That's a wrap. See you guys next week, and we'll start the mini series.